Welcome. I am Dr. Patrice Berry. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share educational information on a variety of topics. Please excuse I am in my Christmas pajamas because I was not planning to go live tonight. Really, what happened is the verdict came back in the Hannah Payne trial. And this has been one that I've been loosely following, but she gave some testimony just the other day. And then she had her cross examination. And then after that, they ended up having some rebuttal witnesses that came forward today. And the jury deliberated for maybe it was about 2 hours and came back with a verdict. If you haven't heard anything about this trial, let's do a quick overview. According to investigators, at around 6 p.m. on May 7th, 2019, Kenneth Herring, who is the victim in this case, he was 62 years old. He was driving his Dodge pickup truck when he ran a red light and hit an 18-wheeler. Both vehicles were damaged, and the drivers pulled over to wait for the police to arrive. This accident was witnessed by two people who pulled over to help the defendant, Hannah Payne, and they're calling him an officer, but an officer with the Georgia Department of Corrections, and they give his name. So the court officer who worked at an infirmary at a local prison examined Herring and noticed that he appeared disoriented. The police officer reported that Herring's eyes looked to be a reddish color, and he believed he was in diabetic shock. Payne and Robinson stayed with both drivers for about 20 minutes waiting for the police to arrive when Herring returned to his truck and left the scene. And I think people were thinking he was fleeing the scene. It's my understanding because they waited for like 20 minutes for the police to arrive. The police didn't arrive. And so Hannah Payne, she did testify during this trial, and she reported somehow some conversation about Mr. Herring being intoxicated, that she thought he was intoxicated, and that's why she did what she did, or like that's why she followed him. And she was trying to get his plates, and that she was following the directions of the officer. According to a defense motion, Robinson encouraged Payne to follow Herring after he left the scene so that she could get his license tag number, which she did, and yet continued. I will continue. Payne reportedly called 911 as she followed Herring to report the tag number. The dispatcher told her to return to the accident scene and not to follow Herring. I do think that's important because often you can be putting yourself at additional risk if you try to follow the person. So, is this an accident, self defense, or worse? According to the defense motion, Payne was concerned that Herring might cause another accident, so she followed him until the police could intervene to stop him. Roughly 1 mile from the original scene, Payne pulled up her Jeep Wrangler in front of Herring's truck to stop him. And the way that they're writing that, so the way it's described by witnesses is that she kind of cut him off so that he could not move. It's almost like she kind of went up on the like she blocked her vehicle, blocked his vehicle so that he could not move. According to the defense motion, Herring revved his engine and attempted to run Payne over. The motion states that as Payne approached Herring's truck, he grabbed her by the shirt and pulled her closer to his vehicle's window. Payne told investigators that she pulled out a pew pew that was holstered to her hip, which she had a concealed permit to carry, and the weapon discharged. Okay. Clayton County Police, responding to a 911 call, reached Herring's truck at 6:20 p.m. and found him sitting in the front seat, suffering from a wound to the abdomen. They rushed him to an area hospital where he did not survive his injuries. According to prosecutors, Herring never got out of the truck, and his blood toxicology report showed no drugs or alcohol in his system. And even if there had been drugs or alcohol in his system, it wouldn't have given a regular citizen the right to like run him down and to do the things that ended up happening. I think once she had his plate number, I think she should have stopped because even in her own testimony, before she blocked him so he couldn't leave, she had his plate number and she could have reported that and then just stopped and did like 911 said and returned to the scene. The state also says that a bystander took a video of the incident in which Payne can be seen hitting Herring with her hand while holding the pew pew in her right. That's what the prosecution says can be seen in the video. I've seen the video a few times, and that's really so I try not to watch these. Videos like this can sometimes bring up like secondary trauma, especially when now, race was never brought into this. And when we talk about bias, when we talk about unconscious bias, people really have to be aware. And often, so an individual, and I'm not saying this was a factor at all. I'm just saying, I don't know if this individual would have run down someone that looked different. Like, sometimes people have in their minds that certain people are criminal or certain people do crimes or certain people are more likely to do certain things, and that wasn't brought up in the trial, and that wasn't a factor that was even addressed. Just as a psychologist, as someone who kind of looks at situations like this, and someone even in my comments, they mentioned that this trial brought up reminders of Ahmaud Arbery for them. And if you don't know who that is, it's horrific case where an individual, the neighbors in the town, they thought the individual would match the description or that he was somehow like robbing houses in the neighborhood and he was just going for a jog. And that regular citizens, that people don't have the right to follow people, hold them against their will, and then pew pew. Like that's just you can't then turn around and call it self-defense. And the prosecution, what they described is that you can't poke the bear and then the bear comes after you and then claim self-defense. So they really saw Hannah as the aggressor in this situation. And there's like video of portions. So there's portions that weren't recorded on video, but there were video of at least the final moments. In that video, it's not possible to see who pulled the trigger because Payne was trying to say, Hannah Payne, she was trying to say that the victim in this case, that he's the one that, like, as they were kind of wrestling with it, that his prints would be on the trigger. Payne faces 8 charges, including 2 counts of felony murder, 1 count of malice murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, 1 count of false imprisonment, and 3 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. And it's my understanding that the prosecution offered her life with the possibility of parole, and I get why she didn't take that because most people are thinking a jury of my peers, they're going to see things from my perspective, and there's a chance that I could be found not guilty. And in our justice system, people are presumed innocent until the court process plays out. Everyone has the presumption of innocence. And the prosecution, to me, because what they did in their closing, the defense's closing seems to just kind of go on and on. The prosecution's closing, there was a PowerPoint, and they actually deferred to the defense, and then so the defense went first and then the prosecution. I want to talk about 2 things. I'm going to start with talking about eyewitness testimony, and then I'm going to talk about the difference between Hannah's in court testimony and the video that the prosecution had. So let's start with eyewitness testimony. I always like to share resources, and while this isn't specifically just for the general public, it does talk about the fact that with evidence, eyewitness testimony is not infallible, which means eyewitness testimony is not always 100% accurate. Little details like the color of someone's shirt or the color of a car, because they've done studies to test people's account of things. where they asked them what color was the shirt, or and it's more of a study, so it's not an actual event. It's something that researchers set up, and they even show them a lineup. Do you remember who you saw? There are lots of things that can create issues with eyewitness testimony, and what this jury did was they asked to see that video that was recorded by that regular citizen who was driving by, because in it, from what I saw, it seemed that Mr. Herring was 100% in his car, and what Hannah says is that he was holding on to her, that he had her hand or her wrist or something, that he somehow had her and wouldn't let her go, and but what other witnesses reported is hearing her tell him to get out of the car, and then she says that she heard, like, a click, and then that's when the weapon fired. So the types of evidence that typically tend to be a little bit more reliable are things like when there's a video, we can see exactly what happened, DNA evidence, and like there are other types of evidence. Now, like I think legally they often try to have everything kind of be the same and like not to play one up more than the other. And even with the witnesses, the other side is going to try to see if they can make that person look less credible. So the individual that recorded the video, I guess they ended up in 2022, I believe, they ended up getting into some legal trouble, and they asked the prosecution, I think I want to say DA, they asked them if they could put in a good word for their legal case with them being cooperative with participation. And the prosecutor, like, they were clear that while they did say they would put in a good word, they did not make the person any promises. They didn't say, "Hey, if you testify, we'll give you a lower sentence," or "If you do this, then we'll do this." Because sometimes to a jury, if they know someone is testifying and that they've gotten a deal for their testimony, often the jury will find that testimony to be a little less credible. So the prosecution in this case, because Hannah testified and she had to be aware that the prosecution had this video, and I would think that she would have been aware of the statements that she made in this video, so the prosecution did not play this during their portion, during the evidence they presented, and Hannah was asked if she wanted to testify. She indicated yes, that she would. Let's play a little bit of that because her emotions came off odd to me. Y'all let me know in the chat if anybody else thought her emotions came off odd.
She has to put on the record what she wants to do.
And I appreciate that, Your Honor.
Okay, so this is the part where the judge is going to ask her if she wants to testify. The judge hasn't asked the question yet. I think she knows the question's coming. And her attorney's likely explaining, but they probably talked about the options already. And I think they cut the audio just to make sure that this is a private conversation between her and her attorney. Because, like I said, the judge hasn't asked the question. I'm gonna fast forward just a little bit. So they're having a conversation. Forward again.
Are you ready?
Your Honor. She said she will testify testify, but there would be, of course, a couple of motions we would want to approach to talk about uh, prior to any testimony.
Okay, so let me put again on the record so that Ms. Payne can personally respond to the questions. Ms. Payne, do you understand that you have a right to testify? And if you want to testify, then no one can prevent you from doing so?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that no one can make or compel you to testify?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that not your lawyer, but you personally are the one who decides whether you will testify or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand if you do not testify, then upon proper request by you, the court will instruct the jury that your decision cannot be used against you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand if you choose to testify, you will be both examined by your counsel and cross-examined by the assistant district attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel that you need any additional time to think about whether you want to testify or not?
I'm sorry, did you ask if I felt like I needed more time?
I did. But understand that I
Okay, so the emotion came together. So it went from being very upset to being kind of calm relatively quickly. So the shifts in emotion seem to happen really, really quickly for me. And this is just from my perspective where I'm sitting. I did not watch this entire trial. I could not imagine being in her shoes. I'm sure there would be a mix of emotions that would come up, but the shift in and out from like being extremely distraught to being kind of calm, that was just interesting to me.
gave you on Friday, all of the weekend to determine. Your attorney has indicated that you intend to testify, and I just need on the record that you will personally place on the record that you want to testify or not. So, do you personally want to testify or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, meaning,
I want to testify.
okay, all right.
Now she's gonna say
Attorney
that again.
Tucker, what motions do you need to make at this time?
I believe
And so the her lawyer's gonna ask for some time so that she can collect herself, and then she gets on the stand, and she's going to go through her version of events. The other side is going to cross-examine her, but, uh, this is where it gets a little tricky. So let me share this screen. So after she testified and the defense rested, the prosecution wanted to call a rebuttal witness. And they had one of the officers that was in this interrogation with her the day of this incident came in. And at the beginning of this, you see her taking off her nails, and a lot of people guess. So she had fake nails on, and there were people that thought, was she trying to, if there was any DNA or if there was anything that had transferred during the struggle, but also, like, somebody could also be nervous and they removed their nails because I think she was in this room for, I think, almost 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half by herself before anyone ever came in. But the version of events that she gave them was very different than what she gave on the stand. And if I was the jury, I would take the version that somebody gives right after. And there are things that she says in this version that is not good for her case. Not good at all. Because it does sound like he was kind of trying to get away from her and she wouldn't let him. And it also just sounded like it kind of sounded like self defense, but not as clearly as she said during her testimony. And so her in court testimony versus what this police interrogation before she's talked to a lawyer. Now she had every right to remain silent, every single right. And so now let's get to what the jury found. I was so shocked that the jury only deliberated for a few hours. They asked to replay the cell phone video that the individual who was driving by, because they didn't like, they were just driving by and they captured the pew, they captured that moment, and that was replayed, I think at least 3 or more times. That was the jury asked to see that. The jury wanted it to be slowed down, and they didn't have any audio visual people available that could slow it down, but let's get to the verdict.
Okay, the court has been informed that the jury has arrived at a verdict, and so I'm going to bring them in at this time. Bailiff Innes, please. In the case State versus Hannah Rainier Payne, case number 2019 CR 01737, court has been informed that you have reached a verdict. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
Okay, and are you the foreperson?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, if you kindly stand. Was your verdict unanimous?
Yes, ma'am.
Has the verdict form been filled in, signed, and dated by you?
Yes, ma'am.
If you would have the bailiff bring the verdict form to me, please. Mr. Foreperson, if you would go ahead and read the verdict.
With regard to count one, as to the offense of malice murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count two, as to the offense of felony murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count three, as to the offense of aggravated assault, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count four, as the offense of felony murder, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count five, as the offense of false imprisonment, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count six, as to the offense of possession of firearm during commission of a felony, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count seven, as to the offense of possession of firearm during commission of a felony, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. With regard to count eight, as to the offense of possession of firearm during commission of a felony, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Respectfully submitted, the 12th day of December, 2023.
All right. So then the judge is going to poll the jury to make sure that that was everybody's verdict. And yes, everybody said, all 12 jurors said that this was their verdict. Now, I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And if I was on the jury, I don't know. The malice part was hard. I think what the jury thought, because she chased him down. So he left the scene, and this is kind of like a hit and run. So he left the scene, and she's a regular citizen, and he's kind of like, and she even said, I think on the stand and during her initial interview, he's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "I'm a nobody. The police told me to tell you to go back to the scene of the crime." And that wasn't, the 911 operator told her to go back to the scene. And whoever was there, that officer, that corrections officer that was there, hey, like, because I think she said, "Did anybody get his plate?" And nobody got his plate. And I might have, maybe to get the plate, but you don't then obstruct the person's ability to go. and I think it was during the recorded interview. So the interview that was a few hours after the incident, she was I don't know if she brought it up at some point, but I heard I don't know if it was on a stream. It was my understanding that she had interest in law enforcement and that at some point she might have wanted to go into law enforcement. I believe she was 20 something. I think she's 25 now. I think she was 21 back in 2019. So at the time of this incident. And it's my understanding that she hadn't had the weapon long. There was this back and forth of did she take a safety class for the weapon? Did she not? I don't know. What anyone will tell you is don't draw it if you because I think she was making it seem like I pulled it out so that he would listen and so that he would comply, almost. That's my interpretation of what she was trying to but the witnesses on the scene said that they heard her telling him to get out and also that he bumped her car or he hit her car. So when she blocked him in, I believe it was her testimony that he hit her car because she blocked him in. And if somebody had blocked me in aggressively, I might have tried to move their car with my car as well. Like I might have, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done in a situation like that. And this whole thing is very sad, and you see her family in the background. These are 2 families that have so the victim's family, and then I think her family is also gonna grieve this situation as well. Let me know your thoughts. Once again, I'm Dr. Barry. I cover the psych stuff here, and if you have questions or more things that you want me to cover, please let me know. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Silly Billy. You're all done? Good job.